So I'm going to try and keep it brief because it's been a very long morning, and everyone's probably like overloaded with stuff. And it's been a really great session, and very interesting things. And I'm going to pretty much talk about many things that are themes that have come up already. So I don't think anything here is going to be a surprise, just another version of the same thing, which, by the way, it's been really, really inspiring to see that I'm not the only one doing these kinds of things and having these kinds of thoughts about students. So for this, I'm just going to talk briefly through a couple of things. So just going to talk about the rationale of the debates and what I teach, just to give you a little bit of context, the details of the debates, and then some student reflections at the end. To talk about all of this. So first of all, I've got my courses, and there's various courses that feed into what I'm talking about here today. This is distance learning and face-to-face students, as well as, and it's a core of the BPS teaching that we do, BPS accredited teaching that we do. The courses can vary from 20 weeks to 12 weeks, just depending on which cohort, whether it's face-to-face or online distance learning I have. And the aim of the course is really to cover everything that we have in the BPS curriculum for social psychology. So it's quite a challenge to do that. Challenges for the future of the subject we've come across time and time again are things like generalizability and application. Okay, and these are things particularly to do with psychology in general, but also very specific to social psychology, which is the course that I teach here. So, in order to address some of these things, and also to address the fact that the face-to-face courses can have 200 students. One class is 200 students, another one has 150 students. My online distance learning students are very remote from me. So I have students in very big classes that can feel very much that they're not part of things. They're not part of belonging. We also have many international students. We have a lot of students at the University of Glasgow, so we have a lot of students who are first in their family to come to university, all kinds of things like this. So what I came up with was how can and the other thing as well is fostering that kind of thing for students does require extra activities. Like we saw, there's loads of from the previous talk. There's loads of different ways in which people foster these things, and some of it comes from additional things that teachers have to do. So I thought, why not kill two birds with one stone and actually put this in the assessment that they're doing? So make it as part of that. And that's the rationale for having an asynchronous debate to help students foster their belonging, but also various other things. And I struggled to figure out which of the 3 days this would fit with best, but went for belonging because that one seemed to work. So what we want to build are skills in critical evaluation in our students. We want to build some experience of collaboration, especially over our distance learning students who often don't get a chance to really collaborate with others. They're very, um, studying by themselves. Opportunities for student choice, but also the most important thing I wanted to do was give students a voice, especially those who are normally quiet in academic settings. So we, as I say, we have a large range of students. So there's many students that normally struggle to speak up. For instance, we have international students who have English as a second language. We have um, students first to study. We have students from across the world and Europe and across the UK, and people come from various communities in Scotland as well. And so very often you have kind of noisy people that are very willing to speak, but then you have these quieter people that are not there. But they can all be part of the knowledge creation process in schools, just as Carly was saying earlier. Okay, so the asynchronous debates are students build the class knowledge base beyond the set materials in the class. So we've got our baseline of set materials, but then the students need to apply this. And the other thing that they need to do is bring some of their lived experiences and their interests into it. So we scaffold this activity, set some minimum expectations, but it is kind of like uh, organized chaos because there needs to be some rules, but you don't want to make them too restrictive. Um, and every time I want to make a new rule, I just sit back and say, do we absolutely need this rule? And why? Why is it there? And usually it comes from student feedback from previous cohorts. Um, But students also have a lot of choice in this. They can choose which aspect of the course they're going to delve deeper into, or they're going to explore more. And it is asynchronous. So students have flexibility over when they engage. And that's kind of important because we have so much variety in our students. The assessment at the end is a portfolio of their contributions. So they have to make 3 posts and they bring all those posts in. They can make more posts. They can change the posts and all kinds of things like that. But in the end, they have to take from the debates the thing that they have written for their peers. And it really, we expect evidence-based writing. At the end, we also include a reflection for them to just talk very briefly about the process of what they had done and things like that. Those reflections are very informative as well, make them think a little bit. So um, we scaffold some important information. So there's position statements. Everybody has to make a position statement. I'm going to talk too much about that, but in the replies is where the real collaboration and belonging starts to happen. We ask people to be collegiate, to aim to add knowledge and not to disparage their peer. So take every bit of knowledge or every bit of thing that's shared there as at face value and as a valuable contribution, even if you disagree with it. But if you're going to disagree, then you're going to have to make it evidence-based. You need to answer your peer because we have in the past had students kind of like just use that as a platform for them to talk about their own things again, but no, it has to be an actual collaborative debate. And the other thing that they have to cover the ILOs in the course with their debates, and so they can use these to fill in gaps that they might not have been able to fill in their previous part. And some key things that we have in here are that the debates are completely transparent. So everybody sees each other's posts. And I'll come back to why that is kind of a good thing, but also a challenge. We do give them opportunities to repost, but they need to give a reason why, so really kind of like be transparent and work with their peers on this, like a proper academic debate, and add references and polish pieces to the end. I'm sorry, that skipped ahead. So that it can go in their portfolio with minimal edits. So here are some of the student benefits that come time and time again. So developing their critical evaluation skills. So one of the things that the debates allow us to do is to give formative feedback throughout the process. So we can come back to students time and time again with some formative feedbacks. And I write a teacher reflection every once in a while talking about their things. We also have directed learning activities that they can practice their writing on Teams forums beforehand. And I give them feedback on their approaches and what they have done there in an informal way. So that is kind of like whatever's there for people to see. That's what we feedback about at the time. And then there's a more formal time during which I give more detailed feedback. So I do give a deadline in November for the semester 1 course. And by that time, you need to have written something, and I'll use that to give class feedback. But this really helps them to develop their critical evaluation and their thinking because they have to write for their peers. And it's a very interesting thing that we notice that students find it much harder to write for peers than they do in to what seems like an anonymous marker, even though it's your teachers. And so it does make them think a little bit about that. Here's another one, which is seeing peers writing. So this is when we first included the debates, it became very clear that students benefited very much from seeing each other's writing. It's kind of like, when we often give them examples and things like that, is highly polished pieces from journals and stuff like that, or if it's simpler pieces, it might be blogs or stuff like that. But they have very little opportunity to actually see their peers writing. And so this gives them opportunity for them to do that and to interact with their peers and to see how the variety of ways in which you can approach a topic. So it brings them out from their own sometimes narrow way of thinking into a broader perspective, which is really helpful. There are a few barriers. So one is an intimidation to write for your peers, and this is related to imposter phenomena. And it can be scary for students. So sometimes they procrastinate a little bit. They don't do these things straight away. But in the end, they often find that it was worthwhile. And this is one of the challenges that we have to face. The other thing is where imposter phenomena, of course, come from is from the fact that people often don't feel that they have a voice. They don't feel that what they have to say is important, or valuable. And this is one step closer to getting to that point for them to practice that a little bit. Challenges and solutions. So one of the things is timing. However, we put in soft deadlines and things like that, students find timing challenging. Most students engage towards the end, and so sometimes it kind of like removes a little bit some of the things that we really want, which is people engaging earlier on. But in the end, there's enough people who do it early on that we actually do do find students are engaging, and they're pretty good at listening to our timings a little bit. And the imposter phenomena, once it's over, students realize why it was good. So while it's a barrier at the time, this is something that they overcome quite quickly. Okay, we're at 11 minutes in, so I'll just try and speed up a little bit. This is the final slide, just as a kind of take home for what it offers. And thanks. I'll take any questions that you have. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very elegant sort of solution. I've run debates in my classes, and non-participation and imposter syndrome are definitely a real thing. And I think for face-to-face debates, in particular, if you get a dropout of two or three key group members, then all of a sudden the one group doesn't feel comfortable debating, then the other group's got no one to debate with against, so the whole thing collapses quite quickly. So
Yeah, but
yeah.
this one, anyone can debate with anybody. They can choose the topic that they want to engage in. And I support them a little bit along the
Mhm.
way. We're thinking about the research questions that they have to say. We have 6 very broad questions, and then they have to refine that themselves. Yeah.
It's great. No, I think it's a very elegant way to address some of these issues. If have you had any situations where it's maybe gone off the rails at all? Like if anyone's.
No, it has never. So we do have students who are very challenged by this. So there's always an opt-out, there's always a kind of like, if you really can't, come and talk to me about it, have a go. And if it's really impossible for you, if you're, you know, if it causes you like such anxiety that you can't even start, that is a real reason to come and chat to me. So there's always a backup plan. I always have a backup plan. But
Why?
it's a very strong message. We're talking with each other together, and we need to learn to do that. And most of the students understand that. And even though it can be psychologically painful for them, um, they they do engage in it, and they do understand why it's valuable to do that. Um, but yeah, it can be a bit of a challenge occasionally when you're like, okay, this person's really suffering. How much do I push it?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's always a balance. Like I think one of the reasons coming to university is to get challenged. I think, and we have a duty of care towards our students, but also that kind of extends for me in preparing them for the real world,
Yeah.
where often these rules and guidelines won't be in place if you're confronted by difficult opinions or attitudes or things like that. So I think it's great.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is I do try and persuade them not to put controversial things in. So, and I get them to say if they're going to talk about something challenging, to put it very clearly as their debate topic, because it's on our virtual learning environment where this takes place. So it's completely asynchronous, um, and they can put a title. So my advice to people is, look, if the title says something that you feel uncomfortable with, just don't click.
Mhm.
Or just don't engage. Um, and sometimes students come to me and they talk to me. I had a student who had experience of war and things like that, and she wanted to talk about that, and I was just like, well, you know, this course isn't quite appropriate for that. It's not a place where you can bring those topics out, because we haven't really covered it. We don't tend to cover that in the social course. It's not, conflict and things like that are part of some of the things that we talk about, but not quite to the extent that you want to do that. So we do talk to students about what is appropriate. And if I see something that is wildly um, inappropriate, I do tell them. The other thing as well is, people want to bring sociology into it. They want to bring human development into it. They want to bring individual differences. And so some of the things is, well, it has to be social. You always have to think about it from the perspective of social psychology.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the evidence angle is important too. Like you gotta back up what you're saying.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much for that, Helena. I don't know whether anyone has any questions for Helena before we sign off this morning's session. We got a comment from Lewis there. I think this sounds great with how big a part of the exams for this degree critical evaluation is. Great way to get used to it, and people will feel more comfortable if they get to choose and refine the questions themselves. Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, the debate in the end is 100% of the assessment. It's a 10 credit module. So it's not a huge amount of credits, but it's 100%. And they've got 3 opportunities to really build their skills. So we don't do an exam on this. It's completely coursework.
that's great. It also kind of helps get around a little bit around the issues of AI, I guess, if you've got students getting in the mix and
Yeah.
debating that way.
So so this is the other thing about peers, writing for your peers. They're canny. And people don't, we haven't seen issues with AI so far in it, but then I wouldn't actually prevent them from using AI. I have a companion course as part of the social psych course, which is on AI. So teaching them about AI, incorporating it into the teaching materials and how I generate things and various things to do with this. Um, AI is very much a part of the course, and one of the debate questions is about technology and how social psychology impacts the modern technological world. Because AI is one of those conversations, social media is one of those conversations, those kinds of things. So the debate topics themselves can bring in quite a lot of issues around that. But in terms of AI, yeah, we haven't seen anything apart from translation, which I wouldn't discourage students from using it for if they use it in cleverly.